Hey guys, tonight we travel to a kingdom you've probably never imagined. A place where the air smells like rain-drenched earth, the hills roll gently like folded velvet, and power doesn't arrive on horseback, but in a whisper. You're standing on the central highlands of Madagascar, thousands of feet above sea level, in the shadow of a thatched palace that gleams gold in the early moonlight. No clashing swords, no shouted orders, just the soft rustle of a queen's silk shawl and the eerie call of a night bird. You are in Merina territory now, and here, battles rarely make history. Instead, it's rice rituals, cow negotiations, and the quiet weight of tradition that shape lives. You're probably not surviving the system, by the way. Too loud, too eager, too impatient for bloodshed. But don't worry, tonight you're only observing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in an ancient grove near Embohimanga, the sacred royal hilltop. It's dark, but not ominous, the kind of darkness that makes you whisper by instinct. The stars pulse gently overhead, and every shadow feels deliberate, as if even the trees have signed royal decrees. It's the 18th century, and you're at the heart of the Merina kingdom, where Malagasy queens have perfected the art of ruling without swinging a sword. In front of you, the royal compound sleeps under thatched eaves, its bamboo palisades casting stripes across the dusty paths. Even in slumber, it seems alert. You learn quickly that this place doesn't sleep like you do. It waits. Every blade of grass and every old grandmother on a woven mat knows something you don't.
A guard passes by, barefoot, humming a tune under his breath. He's carrying a wooden spear, more decorative than dangerous, and he nods at you like you've been here your whole life. That's the trick of this land. It draws you in gently, like a bedtime story laced with eucalyptus smoke. Power here doesn't dress like it does elsewhere. There are no polished medals or metal crowns. Authority glides in silk wrappers, speaks in parables, and rides on the backs of traditions so old no one dares question it. Queens here, especially those of the Merina people, don't conquer land. They gather loyalty like rice stalks during harvest, slowly, methodically, and with both hands. You hear her before you see her. A queen's voice, strong but measured, is delivering kabary, formal oratory to a circle of elders and advisors. You don't understand every word, but the rhythm is hypnotic, the cadence carefully tuned like the strings of a valija. She's not barking orders. She's weaving a net of obligation, pride, and promise, and the people nod like acolytes at a sacred altar. Historians still argue whether this style of governance emerged from necessity or genius. Some say the difficult terrain of the highlands discouraged large armies in military campaigns. Others argue the real brilliance lay in how these rulers anticipated conflict and dissolved it in ceremonial meetings, complex social obligations, or, occasionally, a mysteriously timely illness among would-be rebels. But whatever the reason, the results were elegant. Queens in this part of Madagascar didn't lead with iron, though Ranavalona I might have had a little iron tucked into her silk. They didn't need Jew. Their power radiated from rituals, alliances, and an understanding of land, language, and people so intimate it might as well have been spiritual.
You follow the queen's procession the next morning. She moves slowly, not out of age, but intention. Every step is political. Children scatter flower petals. Elders bow. There's incense in the air, burning wild ginger and sweet bark. No throne is visible, but everyone knows who holds authority. It's not about seeing power. It's about feeling it seep into the cracks of your expectations. Someone hands her a clay cup of rice beer, warm and mildly fermented. She lifts it high before sipping, a sign that the ancestors approve. You do the same, and a bystander shuffles softly, perhaps at your hesitation, or perhaps at your attempt to keep up. This is a world where the queen can't be touched casually, where her words are memorized by poets and whispered into fields before planting season. Even rain here is a kind of approval. When it falls during a public address, it's said the ancestors agree. When it doesn't, well, someone forgot the right offering. Still, don't let the softness fool you. Underneath the ceremonial calm lies a system of control sharper than obsidian. To cross a queen is to be wrapped not in chains, but in silence. Your name disappears from meetings. Your family is forgotten during gift distributions. Your house somehow fails to receive the annual grain allotment. It's subtle. It's suffocating. And it's brilliant. By nightfall, you find yourself once again on the sacred hill, watching lanterns flicker like grounded stars. The queen is inside now, receiving a local chief, whose territory has seen some disobedience. But there will be no public flogging, no parade of punishment. Instead, she'll offer him a rare textile and invite his niece to court. And just like that, power realigns itself like zebu tracks in wet mud. It's here, in the cool mountain air, that you finally grasp the quiet elegance of this kingdom. Power doesn't need to shout when everyone's already listening.
You follow the queen's procession the next morning. She moves slowly, not out of age, but intention. Every step is political. Children scatter flower petals, elders bow. There's incense in the air, burning wild ginger and sweet bark. No throne is visible, but everyone knows who holds authority. It's not about seeing power. It's about feeling it seep into the cracks of your expectations. Someone hands her a clay cup of rice beer, warm and mildly fermented. She lifts it high before sipping, a sign that the ancestors approve. You knew the same, and a bystander chuckles softly, perhaps at your hesitation or perhaps at your attempt to keep up. This is a world where the queen can't be touched casually, where her words are memorized by poets and whispered into fields before planting season. Even rain here is a kind of approval. When it falls during a public address, it's said the ancestors agree. When it doesn't, well, someone forgot the right offering. Still, don't let the softness fool you. Underneath the ceremonial calm lies a system of control sharper than obsidian. To cross a queen is to be wrapped not in chains, but in silence. Your name disappears from meetings. Your family is forgotten during gift distributions. Your house somehow fails to receive the annual grain allotment. It's subtle, it's suffocating, and it's brilliant. By nightfall, you find yourself once again on the sacred hill, watching lanterns flicker like grounded stars. The queen is inside now, receiving a local chief whose territory has seen some disobedience. But there will be no public flogging, no parade of punishment. Instead, she will offer him a rare textile and invite his niece to court. And just like that, power realigns itself like zebu tracks in wet mud. It's here, in the cool mountain air, that you finally grasp the quiet elegance of this kingdom. Power doesn't need to shout when everyone's already listening. You pass a younger man carefully thatching a roof nearby. He's humming a song about ants and kings, and you realize even lullabies here have political undertones. His work isn't punished if it's sloppy, but he knows the queen will visit next week. Reputation is everything. Pride here is what keeps the rice flowing. A light breeze carries the scent of wet soil, charcoal, and a faint hint of clove oil. This is the economy of a kingdom without steel. The women gossip gently as they plant. You catch fragments, a marriage proposal rejected because the young man couldn't offer enough cattle, or a midwife predicting twins based on a dream involving lemurs and honey. It's mesmerizing. This is where policy lives, not in decrees, but in daily life, where queens govern through patterns so old and omnipresent they feel like weather. You're invited to sit beneath a raffia awning or some of the royal advisors are resting. A jug of tamarind water is passed around, and you're offered roasted groundnuts in a small woven pouch. No one speaks about war. No one has to. Because here, a queen's strength is judged by the state of her irrigation canals. The most remarkable thing? These systems aren't enforced through fear. They're maintained through consensus, or at least the appearance of it. Disagree with a royal directive, and you won't be dragged to a dungeon. You'll be left out of the next cycle of work, which, economically speaking, is exile. Still, there are whispers. You hear one advisor joke, "Too much rice makes you forget who rules you." Another responds, "Not if she's the one who controls the water." They both laugh, but the tension is real. Power here must be constantly maintained, not with swords, but with clever timing and endless public rituals that bind the queen to her people in a never-ending performance of harmony.
As the sun climbs, the rice fields shimmer like polished jade. Children run along the levees, chasing a homemade ball made of bundled reeds. A herder walks by with a slow procession of zebu cattle, bells clanking softly. Each animal is marked with dye, symbols, and sometimes beads, not for fashion, but to signal allegiance, ownership, and even political standing. You squint toward the horizon where a plume of smoke rises. Not fire, just a signal. A message is being sent from one village to another. Possibly a birth, maybe a minor flood. Could be news that the queen plans to visit a shrine next week. The important thing is, the system works. It's old, it's rhythmic, and like those rice paddies, it adjusts to the contours of the land. Your sandals are caked with mud now, and your legs ache from the walk, but you feel it, the pulse of a nation led by queens who knew the power of patience, who understood that to own the land, you must first understand how it breathes. And as the day fades and you watch the workers finish their tasks, you realize peace here wasn't an accident. It was engineered. One canal, one rice stalk, one ceremonial song at a time.
You're back at the royal compound just before dusk, stomach full of rice and roasted cassava, legs sore from following centuries-old footpaths lined with whispering eucalyptus. The palace grounds are coming alive with low voices and ceremonial sounds. You catch the metallic ring of a valija being tuned, thin bamboo strings stretched over a hollow tube, twanging softly like a lullaby made of wind. Tonight, something important is happening. Not a war council, not a coronation, just words. And here in the Merina kingdom, words can topple more than armies. You settle onto a woven mat among a small crowd gathering under a broad wooden pavilion. In the center stands a man dressed in a crisp white lomba, a ceremonial staff in hand. He is kabary, a royal orator trained in the ancient art of kabary, the formal speech-giving tradition that weaves poetry, proverbs, politics, and passive-aggressive shade into one elegant and echoing performance. He begins slowly, calling upon the ancestors, naming the hills, the rivers, the bones beneath the banyan trees. The usual bedtime small talk. The queen listens, seated under a canopy of raffia and silk, her face inscrutable as a mask carved from sacred wood. Kabary is not a casual toast or dinner table anecdote.
It's a battleground, except the weapons are idioms and the blood is metaphorical. You watch in fascination as the orator spins a tapestry of phrases designed to persuade, provoke, and pacify, all without ever raising his voice. Tonight's speech concerns a regional dispute over a forest path and who has the right to harvest bark from its trees. Exciting stuff if you're into administrative zoning drama, but somehow the order makes it riveting. He quotes a 200-year-old queen, references a dream involving a jealous ancestor and a spilled pot of rice, and reminds everyone that even a stream divides gently. Shouldn't neighbors do the same?
You glance around. No one is asleep, not even the children. Everyone is listening with the kind of focus that would make a TED Talker sweat. Because in this kingdom, words are more binding than treaties. Once something is said publicly, especially with a queen present, it becomes almost sacred. Historians still argue whether this emphasis on oral tradition was a cultural adaptation to low literacy, a spiritual reverence for the spoken word, or a political tactic to decentralize power into language. But here's what you see. A society where rulers don't just speak, they perform their legitimacy. The queen finally responds. Her voice is smooth, deliberate. She speaks in metaphors. The tree that leans too far into another's shade forgets its own roots. A pause, then a slight smile. No one claps. That would be vulgar. Instead, a low murmur of approval rolls through the audience like distant thunder. Dispute settled. No signature required. You realize something subtle. This wasn't just governance, it was a stage. Every eye was on her, every syllable recorded by memory. No scrolls, no secretaries, just brains trained to recall full genealogies, court decisions, and the exact moment last season when the queen coughed before declaring a village festival. The most terrifying thing about this system? It's sticky. Once something is voiced in kabary, it's nearly impossible to reverse. To contradict it later would be to insult the audience's memory, and in this land, memory is power. That's why queens must speak carefully. One wrong metaphor, and next season's rice harvest might carry rumors with every grain.
As the gathering disperses, you overhear snippets of conversation. Did you hear her use the proverb about the cracked pot? That was for Rakoto's inkle, wasn't it? And another, she said, the moon rises late. Is that about the marriage talks? It's like watching an entire community decode a royal crossword puzzle. Later, you sit by a fire with a local teacher who tells you something that sticks. A sword breaks in a storm, but a proverb is remembered forever. Then he points at the stars and adds, even those lights, some say they are the words of ancestors who never stopped speaking. Sleep comes slowly tonight. Your mind is full of syllables and symbols, of rhythms that feel older than time itself. And as your eyes begin to close, you wonder if the queen is still awake somewhere, scripting tomorrow's kabary in her head, deciding which metaphor might mend a fence or gently end an alliance. No war drums, no marching boots, just words, sharp, soft, and strangely irresistible.
By the time you wake, the mist has melted off the hills, and a slow warmth is seeping through the red earth paths. Today, you're heading to the Queen's Court. Not the ceremonial gathering from last night, but the quieter, trickier game behind quieter, trickier game behind quieter game behind the quieter game behind closed bamboo screens. It's not officially labeled as such, but let's be honest. This is where the real decisions get made, and you've been invited to watch. The palace compound, ringed with polished wooden walls and tall papyrus hedges, seems almost sleepy. But as you pass through the narrow gate, you spot signs of life. A young page polishing a brass water jar,
Two guards playing a quiet game with pebbles. A group of nobles seated cross-legged, deep in hushed debate. The queen is inside, behind layers of woven mats and carefully positioned privacy screens. You're told to wait, and so you do, alongside messengers, family heads, and landowners, each clutching tokens of goodwill. A bowl of salted cassava, a roll of dyed raffia. One man even has a live chicken in a basket. This is the real Merina court. Less Versailles, more village council wrapped in velvet etiquette. Finally, you're summoned. You duck beneath a curtain and enter a low-ceilinged room filled with filtered light and the scent of lemongrass oil. The queen is seated casually, not on a throne, but a mat of honor, surrounded by trusted women, cousins, advisors, and the kingdom's sharpest minds, disguised as gentle aunts. She greets you with a nod, no words. Silence here isn't awkward. It's strategic. You sit, you wait, you breathe. Somewhere behind you, a servant places a carved tray of honey cakes and tamarind tea. No one eats. The waiting is part of the power play. A noble from the south begins to speak. His concern? A boundary dispute over who gets to fish from a stream that divides two villages. On paper, it's nothing. But here, with royal attention, it becomes a performance. He bows. He quotes ancestors. He mentions that his opponent's grandfather once let his cattle trample someone's millet. Everyone nods. Ah, yes, the millet incident of 20 years ago, clearly still relevant. The queen listens. She doesn't interrupt. She folds a corner of her lamba and unfolds it again. Her cousin leans in and whispers something, likely an opinion, or maybe just a reminder that the fish in that stream are mostly useless during the dry season. But this isn't about fish, it's about face. Historians still argue whether Merina queens wielded total power or merely orchestrated it. Were they masterminds or figureheads? Evidence suggests they were both. In this moment, you watch the queen do something extraordinary. Nothing. She lets silence sit in the room until the noble begins to fidget. Then, gently, she asks, "And has the spirit of the stream spoken yet?" It's not a joke. Local belief holds that certain waters have ancestral memory. A priestess might be consulted. A dream might be waited for. In other words, delay. And delay is power. You begin to understand. Queens didn't need to say no. They could just wait, stall, divert, suggest a ritual, offer a symbolic gesture. Let time dissolve the tension. You can't revolt against an answer that hasn't come yet. In the corner of the room, an older woman starts a quiet chant, soft, wordless. It's meant to bless the moment or to mask tension, maybe both. The queen turns to the second petitioner, a woman from the east, worried about her son's eligibility to marry a high-ranking daughter. Ah, marriage, the real engine of royal policy. The queen listens, nods, asks about the boy's cattle count, his learning, and his dreams. Then she leans back, looks out the narrow window slit, and remarks, "If two birds build in the same tree, it must be strong enough to hold them." That's all. The mother beams. It's not approval, but it's not a no. It's enough to return to her village with pride. That's the brilliance of this court. Everything is said in layers. Meaning coils and wraps around tone, timing, and tradition. There are no binding contracts, but 1,000 invisible strings pulling every player into place. You sip the tea now, slightly sour with a hint of hibiscus. It's calming, and you realize how much of this system depends on mutual exhaustion.
The queen doesn't outmuscle her opponents, she outlasts them. Like a banyan tree, she expands gently until there's no room left for resistance. You catch a glance between two advisors, a raised eyebrow, a hand gesture flicked just once. Communication here is a symphony of subtleties. In the Merina court, a silence can carry more authority than a shouted decree. And while it may seem like a slow game, it's lethal in its own way. Those who misunderstand it, who try to force their way to a clear answer or a sudden decision, often find themselves quietly erased. Not punished, just unremembered. You step back into the sunlight, feeling both enlightened and entirely unsure of what just happened. But you sense the queen got exactly what she wanted: time, harmony, and a little more leverage than she had this morning. No battles, no blood, just layered conversation, endless patience, and a court built on the art of ambiguity.
The sun now sits lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the palace grounds, as if even the landscape is leaning in to listen. You're guided along a winding path of compacted red clay toward a clearing where something very unmilitary is about to happen. A royal procession, not for show, but for something more delicate: persuasion. Welcome to the art of political theater in its slowest and most ceremonial form. The queen emerges from the inner compound under a ceremonial parasol the size of a fishing boat sail. It's bright yellow, adorned with raffia fringe that rustles in the breeze like palm fronds whispering gossip. She walks slowly, deliberately, her attendants fanning her rhythmically, not out of necessity. Today is cool, but for effect. Her outfit is meticulous: silken lambas and layered earth tones, delicate amber beads at her throat, and a sash embroidered with geometric motifs that signal her lineage. It's clothing as declaration, as law. You, along with dozens of subjects and onlookers, gather along the route. A small drum is tapped gently by a boy barely tall enough to see over the instrument. The cadence? Soft, stately, hypnotic. You begin to fall into step without realizing it. This is not just a parade, it's a signal. The queen is reminding her people of her presence, her vitality, and, more subtly, her patience. She moves slowly through the crowd, stopping only to accept small offerings, woven fans, dried ginger root, the occasional awkward poem recited by a nervous teenager. Nothing dramatic, everything symbolic. Historians still argue whether these royal walkabouts were mostly religious, deeply political, or a bit of both. After all, what better way to gauge loyalty than to look into the eyes of every village elder as they bow? These strolls, called diabe, doubled as surveillance: low pressure, high impact, queen on the ground, diplomacy.
She turns to a cluster of matriarchs seated beneath a jackfruit tree. One woman lifts a bowl of cooked taro and hands it to a young attendant. The queen nods just once, but that nod will be talked about for weeks. Was it approval? Recognition? A promise? No one knows. Everyone pretends they do. And that is precisely the point. You follow her to a small rise overlooking the rice terraces. There, she pauses, says nothing, and simply looks. That's enough. The village headman, who's been hovering nearby like a hopeful mosquito, steps forward and announces a new granary is being built in her honor. She smiles faintly. A rooster crows too late, and someone chuckles. Even animals can't get the timing right when she's involved. In a flash of lamba and gold bangles, she's back on the move. You pass a group of musicians playing modovani, a box zither with gentle metallic notes that sound like a lullaby riding a breeze. The tempo stays even. The queen's heartbeat might actually be synced to it. You begin to notice how little she says, but how much she communicates. When a man bows too deeply, she lifts a hand to stop him. When a baby cries, she pauses until the mother soothes it. Nothing is left to chance. Every act is performance, but not for vanity, for memory. People will recall this walk, recount it in detail, build stories around every pause, smile, and silence. A girl beside you whispers to her friend, "Did you see the way she stepped over the shadow of the fig tree? That means she's blessing the harvest." Her friend gasps as if this is breaking news. You glance back. Was that on purpose? Probably. Everything is. And this is where it gets brilliant.
See, in other monarchies, a procession might show off military strength or wealth. Here, it's the opposite. The slower the pace, the more understated the gestures, the more potent the queen's message. I'm unbothered, unhurried, utterly in control. No horses, no banners, no trumpet blasts, just woven mats and fanfare played at nap-time volume. Somehow, it's more impressive than any military march. The queen turns once more, waves to no one in particular, and disappears into a grove of tamarind trees. And just like that, it's over. People linger, dazed, not sure what they've just witnessed, but certain that it mattered. Later, as you sit on a cool stone bench, sipping sugarcane tea, an old man beside you offers a proverb. The river never rushes, but it cuts through stone. You nod. He's right. That's exactly what you've seen. This queen isn't simply walking. She's carving, slowly, with intention, through silence, softness, and style.
You awaken the next morning to a steady tapping, wood on stone, slow and rhythmic. It's not urgent, nothing here ever is. You wander through the compound's outer gardens to find a group of men constructing a low wall beside a public walkway. It isn't stone for defense, it's for decorum. One man turns to you and grins. "Fanampoana," he says again, the royal labor system you first witnessed in the rice fields. But today it's something else. This is not about crops or roads. It's about appearances. And appearances in this kingdom are a kind of currency. Welcome to the quiet army of the Merina kingdom. The workers, craftspeople, elders, midwives, and advisors who never lift weapons, but shape the very structure of power with their hands, their time, and their loyalty. You settle onto a tree stump nearby as an elderly carpenter tells you a story, all while shaving a wooden beam with a tool older than your great-grandparents. He tells of a time many years ago when a young noble refused a summons to build the queen's granary. She didn't punish him, he says, eyes twinkling. She just sent him a sack of spoiled millet. You blink. That's it? Spoiled millet, he nods. No punishment, just a message. And there it is again, the soft edge of power. A queen in this kingdom didn't need gallows whips. She had shame. She had exclusion. She had the quiet removal of privileges so subtle it left you wondering whether you'd ever really had them to begin with.
Historians still argue whether fanampoana was a fair social contract or a veiled form of servitude. On paper, everyone contributed to the public good.
In practice, it was an intricate dance between obligation and honor, between mutual survival and subtle control. The remarkable thing? People seemed to believe in it. It wasn't blind obedience, it was collective identity. If you built the Queen's Bridge, you walked across it with pride. If your hands helped weave her ceremonial mats, your village earned prestige. And if your daughter danced in her seasonal festival, well, you didn't just sleep well that night, you were royalty adjacent for a whole month. You follow a group carrying bundles of bamboo and coils of rope toward a shaded glade. They're preparing for the fanampoana, the royal bath ritual that also serves as a sort of New Year's gathering. There will be feasts, renewals of vows, blessings of livestock, and, crucially, the Queen's symbolic bathing to cleanse not just herself, but the entire realm. Not a war drum in sight. As they work, one of the women offers you a slice of dried mango and asks where you come from. When you fumble your answer, she laughs and says, "Don't worry, the Queen understands all accents." Another reminder. Here, the Queen isn't just a figurehead. She's the epicenter of a network that stretches out in whispers and workdays and woven raffia baskets.
A messenger trots by, breathless but grinning. He carries not a letter, but a box of herbs. It's a peace offering, or maybe a polite reminder between rival cousins. In the Merina kingdom, you can patch up disputes with a carefully chosen sprig of ginger root and a well-timed proverb. Beats open warfare, doesn't it? You start to understand that this whole society is built on presence. The Queen's power isn't just in decrees, it's in the visibility of her rule. Every brick laid, every mat woven, every log carved with her crest reinforces her existence. People don't follow her out of fear. They follow her because she is there, in the ritual, in the rhythm, in the labor of their days. And when someone falters, when a village misses its work quota or a family declines to send a daughter to court, the consequence is not punishment. It's distance. Royal attention pulls back like a tide. And in this world, to be unseen by the Queen is to be slowly forgotten. You watch as the workers finish framing a pavilion that will host next week's gathering. They step back, satisfied. It's not grand, it's not gilded, but it's strong, simple, and woven from a dozen hands that remember who asked them to build it. As you walk back toward the compound, your own footsteps seem to echo the slow, steady rhythm of the kingdom itself. One that doesn't charge forward. It leans. It gathers. It flows.
It's well past midday now, and the air has grown thick with the scent of roasted plantains, sun-warmed earth, and something faintly herbal drifting from a corner of the palace. You follow it instinctively, past sleeping dogs, baskets of polished lychees, and a quiet woman stirring a clay pot over low coals. She nods as you pass, murmuring something that sounds like a blessing or a warning. Hard to tell here. Everything doubles as something else. You're heading toward the private heart of the royal compound, the part not shown during ceremonial days. Here, the Queen's presence feels less divine, more human, but no less powerful. You pause at a bamboo gate, where two attendants nod politely and lift the woven latch. Inside, it's shaded, hushed, and orderly, with only the sound of distant bird song and someone plucking a single-stringed instrument in a rhythm that seems designed to slow your pulse. This is the zone of influence behind the throne, where decisions don't come from speeches or processions, but from subtle conversations over tea, slow walks between tamarind trees, and whispers shared on reed mats at twilight. Here, among the Queen's extended family and closest advisors, influence is cultivated like orchids, quietly, in the background, and under just the right amount of light. You're welcomed into a small open-air structure where several women sit in a loose circle. They wear fine lambas, but not the ornate kind used for ceremony. These are garments meant for comfort and quiet power. Some are older, faces lined, eyes sharp as birds' claws. Others are young, watching, listening, learning. You are now in the presence of the court behind the court. And sitting among them, with her hands wrapped around a gourd of herbal tea, is the Queen's half-sister, a woman said to have once negotiated a border treaty using nothing but a marriage offer and a basket of smoked fish. She greets you with a look that seems to scan every secret you've ever had. Then she smiles. You exhale.
Today, the topic is a delicate one. A young court servant was caught spreading gossip about a minor noble's flirtations. In a Western court, this would be grounds for exile, disgrace, maybe a dramatic outburst involving wine. Here, the Queen's advisors are debating whether to move the servant's sleeping quarters to a less central compound. That's it. A quiet repositioning. A demotion disguised as a logistical choice. Historians still argue whether the real seat of power in the Merina kingdom sat on the throne or in the sitting circle of the Queen's kin. Some claim the monarch was a master strategist who used her relatives as eyes and ears. Others suggest it was the opposite. The Queen was often a symbolic focus, while her aunties made the calls over boiled yams and slow glances. Either way, the system worked. And it worked because it never relied on brute force. Everyone here knows that influence flows like water. It moves around obstacles, avoids open conflict, and gathers quietly until it becomes a flood. You watch as another advisor recounts a story from her village. Two brothers arguing over a piece of ancestral land, resolved not by court order, but by being assigned separate festival roles that prevented them from ever overlapping. Genius, and very on brand for this kingdom. There is something hypnotic about how decisions form here. No shouting, no debate as you might recognize it, just measured tones, careful phrasing, long silences, and frequent referencing of metaphor. When the basket is too full, the handle breaks, one woman says. Everyone nods. You nod, too, despite not being entirely sure who or what the basket is.
It begins to dawn on you just how critical these quiet spaces are to the Queen's power. The public rituals and kabary might be the voice of the kingdom, but this inner court of calm, calculating minds is its nervous system. The Queen isn't isolated, she's networked. Dozens of women, most of them family, all of them politically fluent, keep her informed, insulated, and irreplaceable. Tea is poured. Mango slices appear on a reed tray. Someone giggles at an inside joke involving a traveling merchant and an unfortunate pig. Even that moment of laughter feels strategic. Trust, after all, is the soft glue that holds this court together. You begin to see that ruling without battles isn't about avoiding conflict. It's about redefining what conflict looks like. A change in sleeping quarters, a canceled invitation, a knowing silence after someone oversteps. The Queen and her circle don't eliminate threats, they dissolve them. As the sun begins to lean westward and the sky turns amber,
The gathering slowly breaks. A cousin pats your shoulder, saying nothing, but it feels like permission. Permission to witness, to understand, if not everything, then enough. You step back into the open air, into a world that suddenly feels different, as if you've seen behind a curtain you didn't even know existed. No armor, no swords, just a network of relationships spun with the precision of a spider web, and just as strong.
Evening drapes itself over the highlands like a shawl of warm mist and shadow. Lanterns flicker to life across the compound, their soft glow bouncing off clay walls and shimmering gently on the polished wooden beams. Tonight, you're being led down a side path towards what you're told is one of the Queen's more personal operations. Not a ritual, not a kabary, but something quieter. The archives. Now, before you imagine the scrolls and dusty tomes stacked to the rafters, think again. This is Madagascar. This is oral tradition. The archives aren't shelves, they're people. You're brought to a circular building of red earth and woven raffia, cooled naturally by air gaps beneath the eaves. Inside sit 4 men and 3 women, all elders, all wrapped in simple lumbas, and all with eyes like polished obsidian, shiny, unreadable, deep. These are Empatantara, royal memory keepers. Think of them as walking, talking, tea-drinking hard drives. They greet you not with names, but with a question. Do you remember where the cows stumbled before the mango tree was planted? You hesitate. Was this a test? A proverb? A code? They laugh softly. It's all 3. One of the elders gestures for you to sit, and for the next hour you listen as they recite the royal lineage, not from a chart, but from memory. Every name, every marriage, every strategic alliance, and not just what happened, but how and why, and what people said about it while grinding millet near the riverbank. You learn of queens who married strategically to absorb rival families without shedding blood, of festivals moved forward a week to coincide with a solar eclipse, because what better time to cement the dynasty when the sky goes dim and people whisper about omens? Of twin daughters born to a princess, and how only one was raised in court, because twins were sacred, yes, but also dangerous.
Historians still argue whether this oral tradition preserved accuracy or fostered a kind of curated mythology. But here's what you notice. Details don't get forgotten, they get shaped, smoothed like river stones. Names might fade, but patterns stay. And patterns here are everything. One of the elders stands and begins to chant. It's not a song exactly, but a rhythmic naming of events, a weaving of timelines with intonations that rise and fall like breath. You don't catch every word, but it doesn't matter. The feeling is clear. This is how power is remembered, not in stone, but in sound. And then they do something astonishing. They ask you to recall something. What did the queen say during the procession yesterday when she passed the jackfruit tree? You stammer, trying to remember. Something about birds building nests in strong trees? They nod, satisfied. Yes, that will be part of the story now. That's right. You're not just listening to the history, you're participating in it. Your memory, your witness becomes part of the record. Not because it's accurate, but because it happened, and because it matters that someone heard it. You begin to see how this system works. In a land without widespread writing, memory itself becomes sacred. And in a port ruled by queens who rarely use force, controlling the story, shaping how events are remembered is a form of power more lasting than any edict. There's a reason the queen spends time with these keepers, not just to preserve her legacy, but to manage it, to suggest certain phrases, downplay certain failures, emphasize certain victories. It's not manipulation, it's gardening. She prunes, she waters, she lets certain narratives grow in the sun and others wither quietly in the shade.
A woman begins telling a story about a long-dead queen who avoided civil war by holding a week-long funeral for a cow. No, really. Apparently, the cow was sacred to both warring clans. So instead of choosing a side, the queen declared mourning for the animal and invited both parties to perform rituals together. By the end of the week, the fight was forgotten. The cow, you assume, remains a legend. Someone passes you a bowl of cooled rice porridge with wild honey. The taste is earthy and sweet, like the stories themselves. Food for a society that survives not on conquest, but consensus. As the fire dies down and the memory keepers settle into their mats, you feel something strange. Not reverence, exactly, not nostalgia, something softer. A kind of trust in slowness, in the idea that if you walk carefully, speak thoughtfully, and remember generously, maybe you don't need a sword at all. Outside, the queen's silhouette moves through the courtyard, pausing just briefly before continuing into the night. She knows the story is safe in these walls, and in the morning, she'll continue shaping the next chapter, one proverb at a time.
Dawn returns to the hills with its usual quiet insistence, unfolding across the landscape like a woven mat rolled out for something sacred. Today, you're not in the palace or the fields or the shaded inner courtyards. You're on the move, following the queen, not with fanfare, but with purpose, as she visits one of the sacred hills that dot the Merina highlands, Ambohimanga. To the untrained eye, it looks like any other verdant rise scattered with eucalyptus and fig trees. But for the people of this kingdom, it's more than land. It's a living history book, a reliquary, a throne carved from earth itself. The queen doesn't just rule from the palace, she rules from memory. And this hill is where memory gathers like mist. You climb the narrow path behind her small retinue, passing villagers who bow with subtlety. Just a tilt of the head, a murmured greeting, never dramatic. Showiness would be disrespectful. This hill doesn't belong to one queen. It belongs to all of them, past and present. At the top, stone walls surround the complex, but they feel more like arms than barriers. Inside, there are old wooden houses with steep, tiled roofs, ancestral tombs wrapped in sacred silence, and a courtyard where the queen pauses, removes her sandals, and places a palm flat on the dusty stone. No words, no chant, just presence. You join a group of attendants in silence, watching as she walks slowly toward the main royal house, its wood dark with age, its thatch mended countless times. Here, she won't issue decrees. She won't host ceremonies. She will simply be seen, walking the same steps her foremothers walked, breathing in the same scent of clay, wood smoke, and dried flowers. Her authority doesn't just descend from the gods, it rises from this soil.
Historians still argue whether these sacred visits were religious pilgrimages, political demonstrations, or carefully choreographed legitimacy rituals. Again, the answer is yes to all of the above. Because ruling without battles means anchoring power in something older than swords, reverence. You're invited to enter one of the smaller buildings, a royal granary, raised on stone stilts to keep the rats and spirits at bay. Inside, the air's thick with the smell of dried rice, earth, and wood polish. An elder begins to speak, almost whispering. He tells you that in ancient times queens would sit quietly in this very room and listen to the rustle of grain as a way to predict the future. If the rice murmurs, he says, it's either ghosts or the wind, or both.
You're not entirely sure if that's comforting. Later, under a tamarind tree, a young priestess approaches with a bundle of herbs. She places them in a hollowed stone, crushes them with a stick, and smears the resulting paste across a stone slab that bears the faint shape of a handprint, possibly from a queen long gone, or perhaps from an ancestor who refused to leave. The queen observes all this in silence. Occasionally, she hums a phrase of a song older than any kabary, the tune carrying softly on the wind. She doesn't explain herself. She doesn't need to. The act of being here, of bearing witness, of placing her presence into this sacred architecture is more binding than law. You notice that no guards stand close, no nobles hover. This is a kind of sacred solitude, and everyone honors it. The few attendants near her sit at a respectful distance, heads bowed, not in submission, but in mutual memory.
Then, a surprising thing. A village boy runs forward too young to understand protocol, and hands the queen a carved bird on a stick. He's breathless, proud, unaware he's broken about 17 levels of tradition. The queen looks at it for a moment, then smiles, and places the bird gently on the stone platform beside her. Nothing is said, but the gesture, tiny, almost invisible, will become a story. Tomorrow, someone will whisper that the queen accepted a child's gift at Ambohimanga, and by next week, that child's family will be known as the carvers of peace birds, or something equally poetic. That's how myth begins here. Not from command, but from kindness repeated until it's true. You begin to understand that the queen's true power doesn't reside in action, but in reaction, in knowing when to wait, when to walk, when to accept a child's toy without ceremony. She moves through her world like water around stones, unthreatening, yet unstoppable. As the sun arcs over the highlands and the shadows shorten, the queen turns and begins the descent. No announcements, no crowds, just quiet footsteps along a path lined with memory. The sacred hill behind you remains, silent, but somehow more alive than before. And you feel the tug of it still, like a thread tied to your ankle, soft and unseen, but impossible to shake.
Back in the capital, the mood has shifted. It's festival season, fanampoana, and the air smells like honeyed pork and freshly pounded rice. The streets are alive, with people scrubbing their doorways with herbal water, chickens being herded politely, if confusedly, and little children shrieking with joy over the arrival of what might be described as a royal bath, and also, somehow, a national reset button. And yes, if you're wondering, this is one of those rare cultural occasions where hygiene and monarchy intersect in the most ceremonial of ways. You're led toward the palace courtyard again, where a large basin carved from black volcanic stone has been carefully cleaned and polished until it gleams in the sun. Around it, priests and attendants arrange bundles of vetiver, lemongrass, and mint. Onlookers form a ring, humming softly or watching in awed silence. At the center stands the queen, wrapped in a pure white lamba, hair braided with beads the color of clay and storm clouds. She is barefoot, her feet planted firmly in the soil. When she steps into the basin, a hush falls over the crowd. A priest sprinkles her with water mixed with cow's milk, honey, and crushed herbs. An anointment, a benediction, a mild exfoliation ritual depending on who you ask. And in that moment, something happens. You feel it. The kingdom exhales. Because this isn't just a bath.
It's a promise that the year will begin again, that wounds will close, that children will be born, harvests will grow, and cattle won't wander off quite so much, that the queen is not just watching, but cleansing the year, carrying its weight in a bowl of herbal water.
Historians still argue whether Fandrona was primarily a political spectacle, a spiritual rite, or a massive communal excuse to throw a week-long party. But they all agree on this. It worked. People left the celebration feeling like something had reset. Not just the calendar, but their connection to the queen, to each other, to the rhythm of their world. And what a rhythm it is. Over the next few hours, you witness something remarkable. Nobles bow to farmers, daughters scold fathers, gently. Long-feuding cousins exchange slices of roasted zebu meat while pretending they still don't secretly hate each other. You even see a royal advisor kiss a merchant on both cheeks and declare, "May your goats be fertile, even if your manners aren't." It's all part of the magic. During Fandrona, social rules loosen. Old debts are forgiven, or at least postponed. Everyone eats well, everyone bathes, publicly, joyfully, occasionally with a bit too much splashing. It's a kingdom-wide refresh button. If you're lucky, your crush might hand you a mango. If you're unlucky, your crush might throw one at you. Both count as romantic gestures. But don't be fooled by the playfulness. This is also strategy. The queen's role in Fandrona isn't just symbolic. By participating, by bathing first, by allowing the public to watch her become both vulnerable and sacred, she binds herself to the people in a way no law could. It's intimacy by design. And then comes the most delicate part, the blessing of the meat.
After the ceremonial bath, the queen returns to the palace to bless the first slice of royal zoob, a dish cooked low and slow, spiced with herbs that grow only in certain corners of the highlands. She touches the meat with a carved spoon, murmurs a prayer, and steps aside. The rest is distributed to her family, advisors, village leaders, and finally, the people. No one eats until the queen has tasted, and everyone watches her face for the reaction. She smiles, a collective sigh of relief. The meat is acceptable. The year may proceed. Later, as night settles and the fires burn low, you sit beside a group of teenagers roasting bananas on a stick. One asks if you think the queen liked the music. Another claims her cousin once touched the royal sandal by accident and hasn't had a headache since. You say nothing. You are too busy watching the stars emerge above the highlands, scattered like stories waiting to be remembered. And it strikes you again. This queen, this kingdom, has built a system so slow, so soft, so soaked in ritual and community that it doesn't need conquest. It doesn't need drama. It has Fandrona, a bath, a feast, a story passed from one year to the next, one laugh to the next, one queen to another. You lie back on the grass, full of roasted yam and contentment. Somewhere drums beat faintly in the distance, slow, even, eternal. And as you drift toward sleep, you wonder what next year's blessing will taste like.
The morning after Fandrona is strangely quiet, as if the kingdom itself has pulled a blanket over its head for one more hour of rest. The fires have gone cold, the drums are silent, and the scent of roasted meat has been replaced by dewy grass and burnt sugar, the aftermath of too many honeyed yams and not enough self-control. Today is a day of reflection. You're back in the palace compound, seated in a shady alcove beside a wall inscribed not with words, but with symbols etched in the wooden beams, motifs of birds, rivers, rice stalks, and circles that may represent the moon or a drum or possibly a really round mango. Meaning here is always layered.
A young page brings you a cup of tangy tamarind juice and tells you that the queen is meeting with her ombiasi, her royal diviner. Your ears perk up. This is the court's spiritual backbone, the one person who might dare to say something the queen doesn't want to hear and somehow survive it. The meeting happens in a shaded clearing lined with gravel and low benches. The ombiasi, a thin man draped in indigo and bone jewelry, sits cross-legged on a reed mat, his fingers working a set of divination seeds across a woven board. It looks like a game, but the atmosphere is anything but playful. The queen arrives without ceremony. She nods, sits opposite him, and for a long moment says nothing. Then slowly the diviner begins to speak, not in declarations, but in riddles. He says, "There is water near the stone that does not drink." The queen tilts her head. She knows the dance. She's done this before.
Historians still argue whether the Merina monarchs genuinely believed in divination or merely used it as a political tool. The truth, as always, lives somewhere in the middle. After all, if the stars say you shouldn't raise taxes this month, it's not you saying it, it's the cosmos. And if you want to delay a marriage alliance, why not let the ancestors be the bad guys? But today, something feels different. The ombiasi reaches into a pouch and pulls out a tiny wooden figurine, a chicken painted with red dots. He places it beside a curled leaf and whispers a blessing over it. You lean in, trying to make sense of it, but the meaning isn't in the symbols. It's in the silence that follows. The queen speaks at last. "There is fog on the hill," she says. The ombiasi nods solemnly. That might mean anything, or everything, possibly. There's an actual fog. Possibly it's a metaphor for an unclear alliance or a bad harvest, or someone's just feeling poetic today. And yet decisions will follow this exchange. The queen is not ruled by divination, but neither does she ignore it. It gives her a way to pause, to redirect, to consult something larger than herself. Power without bloodshed often means offering people something to believe in, something older, grander, and far enough away not to argue back. As the ombiasi gathers his things, a small girl runs into the clearing with the carved stick. She presents it to the queen and announces, "It's a talking tree!" The queen laughs and accepts it so solemnly as if it were an oracle. "Then I will listen," she says, and again a story is born. Later that day, you find yourself near the market at the edge of the compound, where traders from other parts of the island, Betsileo, Thakalava, Antandroy, have gathered with their wares. There's no imperial flag, no guards with spears, just an atmosphere of quiet observation.
The queen is here too, cloaked and unadorned, walking with only one attendant. She moves among the traders, asking questions about yam yields, river levels, and whether the sea route is still plagued by those overly curious Portuguese. Everyone laughs. And yet, she learns. She gathers information. She maps the pulse of her kingdom, not through maps, but through conversation, price fluctuations, and the glint in a merchant's eye when asked if the season has been good. This is her intelligence network. No spies, just gossip. No surveillance, just salt prices. You realize then, she doesn't just rule without battles. She rules without shouting. Her strength is in the asking, in giving people the space to say what they believe she wants to hear, and then quietly doing what must be done. And that's the genius of her court. Everyone participates in the performance. Everyone plays their part. The ombiasi speaks in riddles. The traders trade in both goods and news. The people bring her symbolic chickens and interpret her silences. And so the kingdom runs, not on iron or conquest, but on ritual,
rhythm, and just enough mystery to keep everyone leaning in. As the sun sets again over the hills, you watch her walk back toward the palace, her figure small against the vast sky. You don't know what the divination meant. You don't need to. You just know that whatever comes next will arrive quietly, and that when it does, the queen will already be ready.
The next morning brings rain, not the violent flooding kind, but a soft, almost apologetic drizzle that slicks the red clay paths and makes every leaf shine like it's been polished by palace servants. You've grown used to the rhythms of this place, the quiet, the pacing, the way even nature seems to move in slow, thoughtful spirals rather than abrupt lines. You're watching the queen today from a new vantage point, not as ruler, but as a mediator. And the scene is not in a palace courtyard or a sacred grove, but in a humble wooden hall on the edge of the capital, where two rival clan leaders are seated cross-legged, each trying not to look like they want to throttle the other. The issue is land, of course. Land and lineage. It always is. One man says his family has tended the fields near the river for 3 generations. The other says his ancestors were there before the river had a name. You settle in beside a group of curious elders, one of whom hands you a piece of roasted cassava like it's a ticket to a theater show. And honestly, it kind of is. The queen arrives without pomp. Her robe is simple, her hair still damp from the morning rain. She sits on a low stool, neither elevated nor centered. She lets the men talk, and talk, and talk some more. There's gesturing, there's history. One of them brings out a rolled cloth with a family tree embroidered in bark thread. The other has a stick, which he uses to draw diagrams in the dirt with dramatic flourishes. It's all very theatrical. She listens. She drinks tea. She raises an eyebrow only once when one of the men starts to repeat himself for the 3rd time, this time louder, as if that will make his story more true. Historians still argue whether Malagasy rulers like her actively mediated disputes or simply provided a space for others to resolve them. In this case, it seems to be both. The queen doesn't declare a verdict. She offers a proverb. When 2 roosters crow at the same sun, the eggs grow cold. Everyone goes quiet. A long silence. The elders murmur. The disputing men glance at each other, not quite sure if they've just been insulted or wisely advised. The queen offers no further explanation. And then, like magic, someone suggests they split the disputed land with a seasonal planting schedule. The other agrees. A boy is sent to fetch ink and bark paper. A new agreement is drawn up and sealed with palm wine and 3 polite nods. That's it. No ruling, no verdict, just proximity, patience, and a proverb. Later, walking back through the palace gardens, you reflect on how rare that is, how unusual for a ruler to lead by suggestion rather than domination. But that's the Merina way. And the queen's most powerful tool is not law, it's presence. You wander toward the royal school, a structure tucked behind an avenue of tamarind trees. Here, children of nobles and commoners alike learn to read, yes, read, and to recite kabary, proverbs, and stories. The Merina people had a writing system adapted from Arabic script, and literacy, particularly in the royal court, was valued as another means of ruling without bloodshed. Inside, a girl no older than 10 is reciting a proverb about a crocodile who refused to leave his pond even as it dried to mud. Everyone laughs. The lesson? Adapt. Know when to move, know when to yield. The queen passes through quietly, listening, smiling. She greets the children not with formal address, but with gentle teasing. One boy stumbles over a phrase and she says, "Careful, if you misquote that one, the spirits might put rocks in your rice." The class erupts in giggles. And just like that, she teaches something. You realize then, this queen governs in layers. There's the visible court, with its rituals and ceremonies. There's the family council, whispering over tea. There's the legal mediation conducted through metaphor. And then there's this, the next generation being molded with stories and smiles, learning that power doesn't always raise its voice. You sit beneath a neem tree, watching the rain taper into mist. A young attendant places a woven shawl over your shoulders without being asked. You're not cold, but still, you feel warmer.
The rain has stopped, leaving behind that perfect post-shower quiet, where every sound, footsteps, bird call, the brushing of leaves, is crisp, magnified, and oddly calming. You've grown familiar with this kingdom's quiet confidence, how it pulses through the people like an invisible rhythm. But today, you'll see something you haven't yet, the Queen at work on international diplomacy. Yes, diplomacy. Without embassies, without formal treaties inked on vellum scrolls, and certainly without the usual fist-on-table theatrics favored by certain European courts. Here, diplomacy is equal parts theater, subtle flex, and shared lunch. You're ushered toward a guest pavilion, open air, fragrant with cedar wood and lemongrass, where a group of traders from the Swahili coast have just arrived. Their boats docked 3 days ago, and the Queen has let them wait. Not rudely, just enough to signal, "You are welcome, but you are not in charge." They sit now on embroidered mats, wearing robes with gold thread and beads in their hair. Their leader is a man with rings on every finger and a smile of someone who knows the weight of cinnamon and silk. And yet, he doesn't stand when the Queen enters. He rises, slowly, respectfully, like the tide obeying the moon. The Queen wears indigo today, the kind of blue that looks like dusk and authority, and something mildly medicinal all at once. She doesn't bow, but she offers a warm, amused smile. And for the next 2 hours, she speaks not of tariffs, not of spice weight or shipping routes, but of stories. She recounts the tale of 2 rivers that met in the mountains and didn't realize they'd see the same sea. She speaks of birds that migrate together, even if they hatch in different nests. The Swahili traders listen closely. They know the rules here.
Historians still debate whether these diplomatic encounters had legal consequences or were merely ceremonial. But most agree the Queen didn't need treaties. She had exchange of gifts, of stories, of expectations. After the metaphors are shared, the food arrives. Grilled river fish with tamarind sauce, banana mash, honey-slicked cakes that stick to your teeth in the best possible way. A platter of wild figs is offered. You watch as both sides select the ripest ones and pass them to the other. This is not just dessert, it's trust, edible and soft. Later, as they sip herbal infusions under the drifting shade of the pavilion, the Queen finally brings up the only direct topic of negotiation, the port. A new pier, perhaps, a revised schedule. Not a demand, an idea. The Swahili near nods slowly and then says, "Where there are good figs, boats will return," which in this case is a yes. The Queen responds not with celebration, but with a proverb. A path is made by many feet, not one. It's not just about ports. It's about policy, politics, partnership. You realize that this entire exchange has unfolded like a dance. Measured, elegant, suggestive,
rather than assertive. The queen has offered no decrees, made no threats, and yet everything she wants is slowly, gracefully, being placed before her. This is what ruling without battles looks like on the world stage. The guests are given hand-woven cloths as parting gifts, dyed with roots and patterned with spirals meant to represent rain and return. One trader lifts his to the light and remarks, "It looks like the wind we followed to get here." The queen smiles again. Then follow it home and follow it back. Later, as you walk the palace grounds, you pass a group of young pages practicing the proper way to pour tea without spilling a drop. One of them mutters, "Don't forget the bow when offering the second cup." Another responds, "Only if they don't eat the fig first." You pause, bewildered, but they're right. Even at this level, diplomacy is already encoded in etiquette, and etiquette is the soft armor of this kingdom. No armies were needed today, no cannons fired, but a deal was struck, a peer secured, a relationship deepened. And not one drop of tea was spilled. The wind today is playful. It tugs at your sleeves, tosses petals across the palace yard, and carries with it the mixed perfume of ginger leaves, fire ash, and sun-warmed laundry. The air feels lighter somehow, like the kingdom itself is exhaling after several days of subtle but significant negotiations. You're accompanying the queen now on a visit to one of her most unique realms of influence, the Women's Cooperative. It's not a government bureau. It's a cluster of mud brick workshops and shaded porches where cloth is dyed, soap is stirred, seeds are sorted, and quietly, constantly, power is exercised. The queen walks here often, not with guards, but with baskets. She brings things, stories, questions, sometimes cuttings from medicinal herbs to share. No one bows when she enters. They wave or they grunt in acknowledgement while their hands stay busy, which might be the truest sign of respect in this place. A woman weaving raffia mats pauses to hand the queen a rough square dyed with crushed hibiscus petals. "It bled a little," she says, nodding at the smudged edge, "but sometimes that's where the pattern finds its voice." The queen accepts it with the reverence one might reserve for a royal edict. "Some of my favorite sentences started as accidents," she replies. In this workshop, decisions get made that will ripple outward for months, maybe years. Whether a new crop of yams will be sold to the northern villages, whether the cloth traders in the east will accept turmeric-dyed lambas instead of indigo, whether the younger girls will be trained first in soap-making or in storytelling. You sit beside a group grinding wild seeds into paste for skin balm and listen as they discuss the best way to navigate a land dispute in their cousin's village. No one uses the word policy, but what you're hearing is governance, soft, shared, and soaked in sesame oil.
Historians still argue how much real power these cooperatives had. Some say they were domestic distractions, a polite way to keep women out of politics. Others insist they were decentralized nodes of influence, quietly shaping trade, diplomacy, and royal policy. The truth, again, likely lives somewhere in the middle, with a handful of seed paste and a very patient stare. Because here's the secret. The queen doesn't need to control everything. She just needs to be everywhere. And she is. Through her family, her rituals, her proverb-laced counsel, and yes, through circles like this one, where ideas travel like wind through tall grass. A young girl enters the workshop, breathless, holding a string of beads. "For the queen," she says, shyly. "It has 7 stones for the 7 lucky goats born last week." The queen takes the beads, slips them over her wrist, and without missing a beat, responds, "Let's hope those goats are better behaved than the last batch." The room chuckles. The moment is tiny, but you can see how it builds loyalty one warm exchange at a time. After a shared lunch of fried cassava and spicy greens eaten off woven mats, you followed the queen to a shaded grove behind the workshops. There, under a low-hanging fig tree, a quiet ritual begins. One woman lays out scraps of cloth, each one marked with a name written in charcoal. They represent families, villages, ideas. The queen adds a square of her own, a deep red one, and places it beside the cloth marked water routes. No words are spoken. Everyone watches. Decisions are being suggested, signaled, absorbed. Later, someone will sew these pieces into a banner that will hang in the great house where community disputes are settled. When people see it, they'll say, "Ah, that's the Queen's red square. She supports the canal expansion." No speech, no policy memo, just cloth. And perhaps that's the most striking thing about how this kingdom functions. Nothing is centralized, but everything is connected. Information doesn't move like a decree, it moves like a story, a proverb, a piece of fabric, a comment over lunch. And the queen? She doesn't command this flow, she swims in it. You sit on a bench made of woven cane and try to take it all in. The slow conversations, the laughter that carries meaning, the little rituals that hold as much weight as a battlefield oath. There are no borders drawn here, no flags, and yet you are firmly in the territory of a queen who governs not through fear or force, but through presence, patience, and participation. The wind picks up again, catching the cloth squares and fluttering them like tiny flags. You watch the red one, the queen's, bend and dance without resistance.
Today begins with smoke. Not the dangerous kind, but the savory kind that curls lazily from clay stoves and hints at something roasting slowly in banana leaves. Breakfast in the palace compound is always understated. No trumpets, no golden platters, just the gentle clatter of clay bowls, the thump of rice being pounded, and the occasional squawk of a chicken who still believes it can avoid destiny. You're invited to dine with the queen's household, not at the head table, but close enough to observe. The meal is vari aminana, rice with greens, and tiny river fish fried until crispy. She eats simply, with her fingers, like everyone else. She picks out a pebble from the rice, holds it up with mock gravity, and says, "Proof the gods want us to slow down." Everyone laughs, including the nobles. This is not a court of extravagance, it's a court of gestures. Later, you follow the queen to an unusual appointment, a visit to the royal woodcarvers. They're based in a long, low workshop near the southern wall, shaded by tamarind trees and permanently scented with sawdust, smoke, and lemon oil. Inside, 3 generations of artisans work together. Grandfathers shaping sacred drums, mothers carving story panels, teenagers arguing over how much curve a ceremonial comb should have. At the center of the space is the hasina post, a carved wooden pillar that's never moved. It holds no roof, it supports no wall, but it anchors the space spiritually, like a lightning rod for respect. Every carving begins and ends with a touch of this post. It's tradition. The queen is here not to commission a war club or a throne. She's here for a box. A simple box, made of dark wood, polished with beeswax and riverstone. Its lid bears no inscription, just a single carved wave curling in on itself like a question. She runs her fingers over the grain and murmurs, "A place for silence." You don't ask what it's for. You won't find out. But you feel its weight even unopened. One of the master carvers, a woman with calloused hands and a voice like dried hibiscus, invites you to sit.
She explains how every queen since the great Rangita has had such a box. Some were for secrets, some were for love tokens, some were just places to rest your hands and remember to breathe. She says a queen needs a room inside her. This is where she keeps the key. Historians still argue whether these boxes were symbolic or functional, whether they held royal decrees, herbal medicines, or nothing at all. But here, in this dusty workshop, the answer is clear. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the queen has a box, that she visits the people who make them, that she's seen touching the post of Hasina, showing she respects the invisible as much as the visible. You watch her sit beside the apprentice carvers and ask, genuinely, which of these motifs looks more like the wind? Two of them start arguing immediately. One draws a swirl, the other insists on jagged lines. The queen laughs and says, "Let the wind decide," which you realize is exactly the kind of vague but powerful thing queens say when they want people to remember a moment forever. Before she leaves, she places a polished seed, likely from a flame tree, into the box. Still no explanation, but the gesture is recorded in 3 different heads, and by tomorrow, someone will have woven it into a thong. This is how her legacy forms, not in marble or battle cries, but in stories people can hum while sweeping the courtyard. As you exit the workshop, you hear the distant roll of thunder. Not threatening, just a reminder that things change, that rain comes, that wood swells and shrinks with the weather. You glance back at the queen, walking with her quiet box tucked under her arm. Not clutched, not hidden, just carried. And you understand. Ruling without battles doesn't mean ruling without weight. It just means choosing what to carry and when.
Evening settles over the capital with that familiar hush, like the whole kingdom remembers it has neighbors. Lanterns flicker to life in steady succession, casting gold puddles across courtyards and corridors. Somewhere, someone is singing a lullaby about a rooster who forgot how to crow, which feels appropriate for a nation that gets more done through silence than shouting. Tonight, you're witnessing something different, not ritual, not diplomacy, not market haggling disguised as metaphor. Tonight is kabary, a royal night of speeches, but not the kind you're used to. This isn't a campaign stump or a fiery address. It's théâtre, storytelling, a kind of communal poetry slam, but with more rice and fewer berets. The Queen's court gathers under the open sky, seated on reed mats in a wide semicircle. There's no stage, just space. And silence. Always silence, but the kind that hums, pregnant with possibility. Then a man rises. He's old, slightly hunched, with a voice like wet paper. He begins to speak, not directly, but sideways. A story, of course, about a fox who borrowed a drum, lost it in a rainstorm, and tried to return a coconut instead. Laughter ripples through the crowd, but the message is clear. Don't cover your mistakes with louder lies. The Queen smiles. This is kabary, the lifeblood of Merina governance. Speeches that are stories, arguments cloaked in fables, praise woven with warning. It's how officials ask for favors, how grievances are aired, how consensus is built, slowly like sap thickening under sun. When it's her turn, the Queen doesn't stand. She simply raises her hand. The crowd hushes, and she begins, not with her voice, but with her fingers. She draws a circle in the dirt. Then says, "This is a pond. No ripples, no fish. Why?" She looks around.
No one answers. "Because no one dared to throw a stone," she finishes and nods once. Historians still argue over the interpretations of her most famous kabary moments. Some insist they were policy declarations. Others say they were subtle reprimands. A few believe they were simply beautiful. And again, they're all correct. After her speech, a young woman recites a praise poem. It's about the queen's hands, how they hold rice, but also kingdoms. Someone plays a 3-stringed lokanga. Its sound thin and soft and impossibly ancient. And then in one of those quiet curveballs the queen excels at, she asks a child to speak. The boy can't be older than 9. His voice shakes. His story is about a cat who built a ladder to the moon because he was tired of small mice. It makes almost no sense. It ends with the cat falling asleep in the clouds. Everyone applauds. The queen leans in, mock serious. "And when the cat wakes?" she asks. The boy shrugs. "He'll climb again." She laughs, and the sound travels like a breeze across a rice paddy, gentle, warm, strangely instructive. That's the point of nights like this. It's not about decisions. It's about the frame those decisions will take. A good kabary is like planting a proverb. It may take a month, a season, even a generation. But when the time comes, it's already rooted in the soil.
Later, you're handed a folded palm leaf with a riddle inked inside. If a house has no door, how does the wind know when to knock? You ask who sent it. No one tells you. It could be the queen. It could be a clever teenager. It could be the fox from the first story. You tuck it into your sleeve anyway, because here, everything carries meaning. As the crowd disperses, you see the queen linger with a group of women from the southern provinces. They're laughing, clapping their hands as one of them mimics the old fox's coconut excuse. The queen joins in, offering her own line. At least it wasn't a turnip. Uproarious. This isn't mere entertainment. This is strategy. She's letting the people speak to her, not at her. And in doing so, she learns more than any spy could tell her. You sit beneath a tamarind tree, full of roasted corn and borrowed wisdom. And you realize that the most powerful statement the queen made tonight wasn't the pawn story or the child's invitation. It was the silence she allowed. Because silence here is never empty. It's just waiting for the right story to fill it.
Dawn returns, with a blue so pale it feels like a held breath. The city wakes slowly. First the distant bleating of goats, then the wooden shutters creaking open, then the unmistakable clack-clack of someone chopping herbs for breakfast. You've grown to love these quiet preludes, where the capital feels less like a seat of power and more like a very large, slightly sleepy village. Today, the queen is visiting the healers, not the royal physicians with their polished jars and foreign instruments, but the imprimacy, the traditional herbalists and spirit workers whose clinics are tucked between alleyways and garden plots. You follow her through narrow paths where banana leaves drip from last night's dew and chickens dart across your steps like they have appointments of their own. The healer's house is simple. Mud walls, woven reed roof,
air thick with lemongrass, garlic, and something that smells suspiciously like burnt mango peel. Inside, bundles of dried plants hang from the rafters like sleeping bats. A bowl of ashes sits beside a mortar, and a gourd of cloudy liquid is already sweating in the vite. The healer is a woman with silver hair, soft eyes, and hands so lined they look like bark. She greets the queen not with a bow, but by touching her own heart. The queen mirrors it, and they sit, cross-legged, unhurried, on the mat. You do too, eventually. The healer begins by offering ranaval, golden water left over from charred rice. It tastes faintly smoky, like the edge of a good memory.
Then, without preamble, she begins her diagnosis, not of illness, but of imbalance. Too much wind in the chest, she says, patting her own sternum, not enough earth in the feet. The queen nods seriously, as if discussing state matters. And perhaps she is. This isn't a checkup, it's a consultation with the spirit of the kingdom itself. The healer asks questions, not about symptoms, but about dreams. The queen answers with metaphors. I dreamed I wore shoes of salt, she says, and the ground turned to steam. No one flinches. The healer frowns slightly, reaches for a jar of ground tree bark, and murmurs a chant under her breath. Historians still argue about the role of traditional medicine in royal governance. Some saw it as superstition. Others, especially those who lived here, understood it as community care, ritual grounding, even soft intelligence gathering. A queen who knows what people are afraid of is a queen who knows how to lead. Today's healing is gentle. A small poultice applied to the queen's wrists, a sachet of dried herbs tied to her waistband, a few words whispered only once, let what you carry you too. Later, she laughs with the healer over an old joke about onions as love charms. I tried one on my uncle once, she confesses. He ended up marrying a yam seller. The queen grins. Well, it worked. Outside, children crowd around the doorway with offerings, a sprig of wild mint, a carved twig, and a beetle with unusually shiny wings. The queen accepts them all, handing back smiles like they're rare coins. As you walk back towards the palace, she tucks the sachet beneath her belt, humming softly. Not a song you recognize, but one that seems to keep time with her footsteps.
You pause near a grove of traveler's palms, watching their enormous fronds sway like hands mid-gesture. A young attendant whispers, that herb will keep her dreams from running too far. You nod, even if you're not entirely sure what that means. Maybe it doesn't matter. What you do understand is this. Power here isn't just rooted in law or lineage. It's rooted in balance between body and spirit, tradition and change, silence and speech. And this queen, she checks on that balance the same way she checks the pulse of a nation, by listening, by showing up, by drinking smoky rice water on a mat with someone who smells like garlic and knows the names of all the trees. You watch as she disappears into the quiet, steady heart of the capital, and you realize the kingdom sleeps well not because of soldiers at the gate, but because someone is tending the dreams.
The sun is higher today, and with it comes a dry breeze that stirs the red dust into lazy spirals along the footpaths. You've begun to notice how nothing in this kingdom moves quickly unless it absolutely must. Even time seems to walk, not run.
And now you're heading with the queen toward the outer rice terraces. Yes, those legendary rice fields. The green staircases carved into the hillsides, like someone decided farming should be beautiful. This isn't a symbolic visit. She's not here to wave from a distance or ceremonially plant a seed while someone else does the work. She's here for something far more interesting, a land reassessment. You wouldn't think that would be exciting, but as with everything else in this kingdom, even bureaucratic land surveys feel like folklore with a dash of polite drama. The queen is greeted by a cluster of elders, farmers, and scribes, one of whom is already hunched over a banana fiber ledger, the nib of his reed pen tapping an impatient beat. Nearby, a young boy holds up a stick and explains quite seriously that this particular field once belonged to his grandfather before the river moved. The river, by the way, has not moved in a century. The queen chuckles. "Rivers can be very persuasive," she says. The purpose of today's gathering is to resolve who has the rights to a particularly fertile plot that two families have both been cultivating for years. Neither side wants to give it up, and neither wants to be seen as fighting. So instead, they've turned to the most Merina of solutions: make it a royal problem. Historians still debate how much power the Merina queens wielded over agricultural policy. The answer clearly is as much as they wanted, as long as they made it look like someone else's idea.
The queen listens as each side presents their claim. One family has a canoe paddle with an inscription, supposedly from a grateful ancestor who was granted the field after rescuing a runaway chicken. The other family offers a woven belt with an embroidered proverb, "The hand that sows should sleep beside the root." It is unclear whether this proverb is ancient or invented for today. No one questions it. Rather than issue a decree, the queen does something you're beginning to recognize as her trademark move. She asks a question. If the land had a voice, she says, who would it ask to feed it? Silence. Then one of the elders, a wiry man with more beard than teeth, says, "The one who sings while planting." Everyone nods, slowly. Then the queen proposes a trial season. Both families will plant, harvest, and measure yields. The better steward keeps the land. The other receives a new plot closer to the canal. It's not victory or defeat, it's balance. And here's the twist. The canal pot might actually be better. This entire judgment, wrapped in tradition and poetry, might just be a quiet reorganization of land management strategies disguised as storytelling. Later, she walks the terraces with one of the old farmers. He tells her that the new irrigation trench needs repair and that his son wants to study outside. Outside means the coast or maybe even Mauritius. The queen listens, offers no promise. But she does tap a stone with her foot and say, "If you want him to return, plant something worth coming home to."
As the afternoon shadows lengthen, she kneels and presses her palm into the soil. "Still warm," she murmurs, "still listening." You realize that these visits aren't ceremonial, they're sensory. She's collecting the smell of wet clay, the crunch of brittle stems, the gossip of farmers who speak in half-jokes and whole truths. This is her intelligence, her ministry of mud. As you follow her back toward the capital, your feet coated in fine red dust, a girl runs up with a cloth bundle. She unwraps it to reveal 3 perfect rice stalks, bound with twine. "For the queen," she says. The queen bends low, accepts them with both hands, and replies, "Tell the field I said thank you." You wonder, not for the first time, how someone can be both ruler and neighbor, myth and woman all at once. And yet, here she is, with rice in her arms and dust on her hem.
It's a cool morning, and for once, the palace feels oddly empty. The usual clatter of foot traffic and market chatter is muted, as if the city has collectively decided to sleep in. You're told the queen has gone to the ancestral tombs.
This isn't a state visit. There's no entourage, no proclamations, no ceremonial drumbeat. Just a wrapped basket, a single guard, and the quiet crunch of footfalls on a path that leads away from everything loud. You follow at a respectful distance, through valleys mottled with mist and hills dotted with zebu tracks. The tombs appear like they always do in this part of the world, not grand or towering, but low and patient. Earthen, stone-lined, and moss-hugged, they're less like monuments and more like whispering mouths buried in the hills. This is where Merina royalty comes home. There's no fanfare. The queen steps into the clearing, removes her sandals, and kneels. She unwraps the basket. Dried flowers, honeyed rice, a scrap of indigo cloth, and a folded note, which she places with careful ceremony atop the central stone. No one speaks. Even the birds seem to hush. She touches the tomb gently and whispers something you don't catch. Then she sits and waits. You sit too. Time passes. A breeze sighs. An ant crawls across your foot.
Finally, she speaks, not to the tomb, but to you. Do you know why our tombs are not tall? You shake your head. Because we believe it's the earth that holds us up, not the sky. She smiles slightly. The sky forgets. Historians still puzzle over how deeply the Merina rulers tied their political identity to the dead. Some believed the tombs were symbolic, cultural anchors. Others argued that these sites were deeply strategic, a way to unite distant clans around a shared lineage. Most agree the visits weren't optional. A ruler who ignored the ancestors did so at her peril. As the sun lifts over the trees, the queen lights a small cone of dried herbs. The smoke swirls upward, lazy and fragrant, carrying messages no historian could ever footnote. Nearby, a bird calls 3 times. The queen stands, brushes dust from her skirt, and begins the descent home. But the day's lesson isn't over. On the way back, she stops at a tiny settlement where a wrinkled woman is drying beans in the sun. The queen kneels beside her like they've known each other for years. Maybe they have. Maybe this is just how things work here. Still growing, the red ones? The queen asks. They listen better than the white ones, the woman says. The queen grins. Beans that listen are rare. They talk for a while about soil, about grandchildren, about how the river curve has changed ever so slightly. Nothing of statecraft, and yet everything about statecraft. You realize, watching them laugh under a crooked papaya tree, that this is also governance. Not the official kind, but the kind that anchors a queen not just to law, but to land, to memory. Before leaving, the queen presses something into the woman's palm, a smooth oval stone, warm from her pocket. A river gift, she says. The woman kisses it. No explanation needed. As you walk the rest of the way back, you feel the weight of this morning settle into your bones. Here, the dead are not gone. They're present in the curve of a path, the bend of a bean pod, the quiet conversations held in the presence of stones. You ask the queen, softly, do you ever feel like they answer? She looks at you for a long moment and then says, only when I forget the question.
The palace courtyard smells like hot stone and jasmine today. And there's a restlessness in the air, as if even the walls are waiting for something to happen. You're told this is a day of internal matters, which in most courts would mean paperwork and muttered arguments behind closed doors. But here in the Merina capital, internal matters come with drums. You follow the sound to the back courtyard, where a group of young initiates, adolescent boys and girls, are lined up in matching woven sashes, looking like they're halfway between terrified and thrilled. Today is their Tanyendrasana session, their formal introduction to royal responsibility. It's not a military induction or a government job posting. It's more like a civic coming-of-age ceremony, a cultural re-anchoring. The queen arrives without fanfare, barefoot, carrying a gourd of race beer and a branch of dried vetiver. She walks the line, not inspecting, but welcoming. To each youth she offers a proverb. Not instructions, not orders, just phrases, each one tailored. To a tall girl with skeptical eyes, a straight tree still needs wind to remember it's alive. To a boy already fidgeting with the hem of his sash, the fastest feet find no shade. You don't know all of them mean. You're not supposed to. That's part of the tradition. These sayings will be chewed over, gossiped about, puzzled through by family members and elders. It's how responsibility is passed here, not as a burden, but as a mystery to solve, a metaphor to grow into. Then the ceremony shifts. One by one, the initiates are led to a circle of stones and asked to answer one single question. What will you protect?
Not who will you fight, not what will you take, just what will you protect? The answers vary. Some say, my little brother. Others name a river, a field, even a song. One boy says, my grandmother's knees. Everyone laughs, including the queen, but she claps once in approval. Historians still debate the actual function of these rites. Some claim they were more social than political, symbolic bonding rituals without much policy impact. Others argue they were foundational, an early form of public office with accountability woven into oral memory. Either way, the moment has weight. After the pledges, the queen steps forward and pours a small amount of rice beer onto the earth. For the promises we forget, she says, may the ground remember. Then laughter, music, and food. Fried plantains, boiled peanuts, sticky rice balls wrapped in banana leaves. A grandbrother sings a song about a duck who thought it was a goat, and the initiates collapse in giggles. You're handed a slice of cassava pie and told without explanation that today you're an honorary auntie. You decide not to ask questions. Later, walking through the shaded palace corridors, the queen stops beside an open window. She's holding one of the vetiver branches, stripping it gently with her thumbnail. She asks, do you know why we use this herb today? You shake your head.
It's stubborn, she says. You pull it out and it grows back stronger. That's what I want them to be. You think of the boy and his grandmother's knees, the girl with the wind and the straight tree, the circle of stones where answers were offered to nothing visible but something deeply present. This is how nations remember themselves, not through flags or battles, but through what children are taught to hold sacred. As the queen moves on, she hums a few notes of the duck and goat song, low and tuneless, and it echoes strangely down the corridor, half lullaby, half spell. You don't know if these children will grow into officials or farmers or dreamers, but you know they will never forget this day.
and neither will you.
Midday heat presses down like a warm hand today, and even the palace dogs seem disinterested in movement. You find the queen beneath the fig arbor, a rare place of full shade where time itself seems to pause between breaths. She's not alone. Spread out on a woven map before her are small clay figures, dozens of them, painted in red, black, and ochre. Tiny houses, goats, women carrying baskets, men with spears, children, boats, trees, crocodiles. You think, at first, it's a game. It is not a game. This is the Lalan Kaleha, the path map, a form of spatial storytelling passed down through generations of queens. When decisions need to be made, big ones, kingdom-shaping ones, this is where they begin. In the dirt, with clay figures and cool shade and no parchment in sight. Today, the queen is designing new paths. She places a row of houses near the river figure, a goat beside each. Then she shifts a boat upstream, closer to a bend. Watching her, it's like witnessing a child's playtime and a general strategy session at once. A counselor arrives and sits cross-legged across from her. If we widen the path, he says, gesturing to a row of clay dots, we risk losing 2 terraces. The queen studies the map, then calmly lifts a figure, a woman with a basket, and moves it to the terrace. We risk her, she says. This is how choices are weighed here, not just in terms of grain or yield, but in people, in lives, in baskets and goats, and the stories they hold.
Historians still argue whether this practice was ceremonial or genuinely functional, but many believe it formed the basis of a uniquely Merina decision-making structure, visual, relational, slow, and deeply human. A servant brings a tray of cool tamarind juice. No one drinks yet. The queen is focused. She moves a crocodile figure slightly upstream. Let it guard the canal mouth, she says. You're not sure if she means symbolically or literally, maybe both. Then, turning to you, she says quietly, "This is how we remember we don't rule from above." She taps the earth. "We rule from here." She explains how every figure represents not just a person or place, but a choice, a web of ifs. If she walks here, who does she see? If the goat grazes here, what does it trample? Every figure holds consequence. Suddenly, she removes one entirely, a small child beside a tree. Silence. Because sometimes things vanish.
That silence says more than any council meeting ever could. A young scribe nearby begins drawing the arrangement in charcoal on cloth, capturing the moment, not to archive it in a vault, but to take it to the villages affected. This decision map will travel. People will see it, trace it with their fingers, nod or frown, or propose a change. The queen expects this. This is not a plan, she says. It is a beginning. You sit with her a little longer, watching her move one tiny house, half a finger's width to the left. She seems pleased with this shift, though she doesn't explain why. Then the figures are gathered, gently, reverently, and returned to their little wooden box. She brushes the dirt clean with her palm. And just like that, the future has been imagined, negotiated, and made portable. As she stands, a breeze flutters the fig leaves overhead. One falls, landing squarely in the now empty patch of dust where a boat used to be. You pick it up. She says, "Keep it. The river always sends a sign."
The day unfolds with a quiet tension, Not the kind you can see exactly, but the kind you feel. The kind that tugs gently at collars and makes everyone walk a bit more carefully. Even the birds seem to chirp in lowercase. Today, the Queen will hear a petition. Not just any petition, a disputed lineage case. In most monarchies, such things end in duels, exile, or a conveniently timed hunting accident. Here, it ends with bamboo mats, a pot of boiled corn, and a great deal of metaphor. You arrive at a shaded courtyard just past mid-morning. A semicircle has formed. 2 extended families, their elders in front, younger members fidgeting at the back. Between them sits the Queen, grounded in her favorite cross-legged posture, looking equal parts amused and solemn. The issue: 2 branches of the same clan both claim descent from a royal advisor who lived 5 generations ago. The line matters because it affects access to grazing land, water rights, and, most importantly, the right to place a symbolic offering at the Queen's upcoming ancestor ceremony. It's prestige, it's identity, it's personal. A small drum beats once, signaling the beginning of formal speech. A man with a cane, that's more for show than support, stands and begins. He doesn't launch into accusation. He tells a story about a chicken who laid 2 eggs in the same nest, but only one chick remembered where home was. The Queen nods. Then the other group speaker arises, a woman with a voice like morning wind through dry leaves. She doesn't refute the chicken. Instead, she offers her own, a banana tree that bore fruit even after its root was forgotten.
This is how arguments here happen, not in volume, but in layers. Historians still debate the legal status of these sessions. Were they binding, performative, a clever form of communal therapy? Whatever their nature, they clearly mattered, because everyone is here and everyone is watching. As the families take turns, offering lineage tales, naming distant cousins and improbable midwives, the Queen listens with stillness that feels almost magical. She doesn't interrupt, she doesn't take notes, but when one speaker claims a grandparent planted the first cassava in the highlands, she raises a single eyebrow. It's enough. He quickly revises. After an hour, she speaks, not to choose sides, but to ask a question. If 2 trees cast shade on the same child, does the child owe both or neither? No one answers. That's the point. Then she asks for the scrolls, charcoal genealogies kept by each family, passed down and updated like living documents. The scrolls are unrolled on the ground like snakes. She traces her finger along each, stopping only once to smile. She says, "You both claim him," tapping a common name, but neither remembers his sister. Gasps, whispers, a pause. This is the turning point. The Queen proposes a merging ceremony, not ruling. Both families will jointly tend the ancestor shrine this season. Both will rotate water rights, and both will be required to submit an oral history that includes the forgotten sister, who, she adds with a wink, may have been the clever one anyway. Relief ripples through the circle. There's some muttering, but also laughter. One of the grandsons lets out a breath like he's been holding it since birth. The Queen stands, brushes her hands clean, and says, "Let the land remember both names, and let the land forgive the gaps." Later, as people begin to leave, she walks you toward the hibiscus hedge and says softly, "Truth isn't always what people need. Sometimes they need a place to stand together."
You glance back at the two families, now clustered around a shared pot of cornmeal, arguing over whose spice blend to use. The dispute is not solved, but it has been absorbed, transformed into something livable. The queen plucks a hibiscus flower, presses it to her nose, and adds, "Besides, if we waited for perfect memories, we'd all be ghosts."
The skies today wear a thin veil of gray, the kind that never quite becomes rain, but still makes everything feel hushed, as though the clouds are listening too. You're accompanying the queen on a lesser-known duty, one rarely written down, the inspection of silence. It's exactly what it sounds like. Every few months, the queen visits 3 sacred places where no one is allowed to speak, not because of law, but because of custom. These are known as the voiceless groves, and though their trees bear no fruit, they grow entire forests of reverence. The first grove is on a rocky rise just beyond the edge of the city, a circle of tall tamarind trees, their trunks blackened by time, not fire. The queen removes her sandals, enters barefoot, and gestures for you to stay at the edge. You obey. Inside, she walks slowly, deliberately, her feet disturbing leaves, but not birdsong. She kneels before a cluster of stones arranged like a question mark, bows once, and places a small offering. 3 white beans, a twist of salt, and a single red thread. She doesn't speak. Neither does anyone else. Historians still argue about the origins of the voiceless groves. Some say they were old council sites. Others claim they were once burial forests for lost children, or places where treaties were sworn in silence so they'd never be broken aloud. No one agrees. No one dares to write new rules. You wait until she returns, and she nods, her expression unreadable. She speaks only once, quietly. The stones are listening again.
The second grove lies within a village, not on the outskirts, but at its center. Oddly, no buildings touch its border. Everyone lives around it, like orbiting planets. The trees here are shorter, with bark that flakes like parchment. At the base of one is an old clay bowl. Inside, nothing. But the queen adds a smooth stone from her pocket. One of the village elders explains later, "We don't know what it's for, but it's never supposed to be empty." Back in the capital, the final grove is not even a grove, just a single towering tree in the courtyard of an abandoned monastery. Its roots rise like frozen waves, and its branches stretch with the heavy grace of forgotten wisdom. Children are forbidden to climb it. Even birds avoid its crown. The queen sits beneath it for nearly an hour. You sit nearby counting the breaths between gusts of wind. Then she rises and says, "This is where we bury noise." You don't know what that means. She smiles, as if reading your thoughts, and adds, "If I don't have a place to be quiet, I forget what I meant to say." It makes a strange kind of sense. Later that evening, back in the palace, she calls together her close advisors. There are no speeches, no reports, just a question. What did the silence say today?
One says that the trees still trust us. Another offers that the bowl wants more than stones. And someone, half-joking, mutters that we should cancel tomorrow's tax meeting. The queen laughs, then responds, "Let's postpone it. If the land asks for silence, we shouldn't answer with noise." That night, the drums are softer. No dancing, no proclamations. Just a soft flute, a few bowls of ginger tea, and the gentle scrape of someone sweeping the courtyard in slow circles. You lie awake longer than usual, thinking about those groves. How they speak in stillness. how something doesn't need a voice to be heard. How sometimes power is knowing when to say nothing at all.
There's a kind of brightness today that feels ceremonial, even if nothing official is on the calendar. The sun hits every corner of the palace with just enough gold to make the stone shimmer, and someone's laid out woven mats all along the east veranda. That only means one thing. The Queen is preparing for a teaching day. Not to learn, though she often does that too, but to teach. Not at a school, but under the sky, with a pot of lemongrass tea and a handful of students who have no idea they're about to be disoriented in the most enlightening way. They arrive just before midday, a mix of scribes in training, young ministers, 2 slightly nervous herbalists, and a carpenter's daughter whose only official job is listener, which is apparently a real position. You're invited to sit in. The Queen begins with a question, naturally. She asks, if you are a basket, what would you carry that no one could see? There's a long silence. One boy says, secrets. Another tries, regret. A third says, wind. And everyone laughs, but the Queen claps once, approvingly. Good, she says. Now let's learn something. What follows is less like a lesson and more like a gentle intellectual ambush. She tells a parable about a lazy moon who refused to reflect the sun and was punished by being loved anyway. She asked them to translate that into governance. They struggle.
She shows them an old map of the kingdom, then flips it upside down. Still looks like home? She asks. Then she walks them through the royal granaries, yes, the real ones, where she quizzes them not on capacity or weight, but stories. Which harvest led to a village marriage boom? Which drought caused the ghost festival to be moved up a week? They're not ready, she knows that. That's the point. Historians still argue about the Queen's pedagogical methods. Some call them eccentric, overly poetic. Others say she cultivated the most agile court minds in generations, not by drilling them with facts, but by wrapping truth in confusion, then waiting to see who untangled it. During a break, she hands each student a leaf with a proverb inked on the underside. No 2 leaves are the same. They must decipher and then trade them, because no one holds every answer, she says. You're handed one too. It reads, even the quiet mango rots if not eaten. You pocket it. You're still not sure what it means. The Queen leads a final session beside the water cistern, where reflections shimmer just enough to distract. She tosses a pebble in, watches the ripples, and asks, if the ripple doesn't know where it started, does it matter? The students say nothing. A few take notes. One just smiles and murmurs, maybe. And that's enough. The day ends with sweet yam cakes and silence. No formal dismissal, no summary. The Queen simply wanders off into the courtyard, humming. You ask one of the scribes what he learned. He blinks, then says, that I've been memorizing answers when I should have been asking better questions. Later that night, you catch the Queen alone on the roof, staring at the stars. Did they learn anything, you ask? She shrugs. Maybe not yet. But their questions are getting stranger. That's the first step. You sit beside her, watching the same constellations that shape the rice seasons and the migration paths and the stories passed down through basket weavers and wind talkers. And you wonder, what would you carry in a basket that no one could see? The answer might be this day. The morning arrives with a rattle of palm fronds and the faint scent of wood smoke. Something in the air feels expectant. Not tense exactly, but as if the earth has taken a deep breath and hasn't exhaled yet. Today, the Queen is due to receive a delegation from a coastal kingdom. seafarers with gold-threaded sashes and boat-calloused hands, known equally for their fish diplomacy and extremely competitive ceremonial wrestling. They've arrived bearing gifts, grievances, and one very large bird in a gilded cage. You're not sure if the bird is symbolic or just noisy. Probably both. The royal court assembles in the open-air hall, a stone pavilion shaded by massive beams and carved lintels. It smells of sandalwood and wet clay. The queen sits calmly, her chair simple but elevated, flanked by her oldest advisor and a boy no older than 10 holding a fan made of woven reeds and sheer confidence. As the coastal leader steps forward, the formal greetings begin. Metaphors, layered titles, flattery about ancestral rainfalls, and the usual poem about mangoes that somehow ends in a veiled land request. Standard protocol. Then the gift is unveiled. A necklace of coral beads, a satchel of dried sea cucumber, which smells exactly as you fear, and the bird, a crowned heron with judgmental eyes and an attitude problem. The queen listens. She asks questions. She compliments the coral, side-eyes the bird, and thanks the envoy for the honor of his metaphors. Then she tells a story of a queen who once received a zebra as a gift and accidentally started a stampede of trade policy changes.
Everyone laughs, mostly. Then the matter turns serious. The coastal delegation wants expanded salt trading rights. The queen counters with a concern about harbor tariffs. They raise a point about flood wall repairs. She counters by asking who controls the mangrove forests now. It's a dance, but not one performed with bluster. Here, negotiation is a performance of attention, a careful mirroring of concerns in metaphors, like weaving a mat from reeds that don't like to bend. Historians still analyze the diplomatic style of queens like hers. Many called it soft, but underestimated its precision. There's a reason she was rarely caught off guard, because she allowed others to think she'd missed a beat, only to loop their own arguments back around them like vines. At one point, she pauses and offers roasted peanuts to the envoy, a ritual gesture, but also an invitation to slow down. She says, if we chew too fast, we swallow the shell. Eventually, an agreement is reached. The salt trade is permitted, seasonally with new oversight. In return, the queen receives 2 shipwright apprentices to train inland workers in boat repair. Everyone leaves with something. Even the bird, who's been quiet exactly once when the queen stood. As the hall empties, she turns to you and says, "Salt is never just salt." You nod, as though you already understood this. Later in the gardens, you ask her what she thought of the envoy's tactics. She replies, "They came with too many gifts. When someone gives you everything at once, they're hiding the one thing they really want." And the bird? She laughs. "I think it hated me. Good taste." That night, as stars needle through the indigo sky, you hear the heron making strange honking noises from its perch. It's unsettling, but also weirdly reassuring. Some diplomacy, you realize, ends in war. Some ends in metaphor. And sometimes it ends with a judgmental bird being adopted into a royal aviary, where it will live out its days sulking and being occasionally offered tamarind seeds by children who believe it might be a god. You wake before dawn to the scent of charcoal smoke and boiled ginger, signals that something important is about to unfold. The queen is already gone from her chambers. A servant informs you with an air of mischief. She's gone to climb the hill that listens. Right, that's not cryptic at all. You follow, of course. The path winds past the outskirts of the city,
past rice fields still wrapped in mist and banana groves just beginning to rustle with morning chatter. At the hill's base stands a weathered wooden gate carved with spirals and lizard motifs. No one guards it. It guards itself. Up the hill you go. At the top, you find her, alone, wrapped in a dark shawl, seated on a stone that seems precisely shaped for a thoughtful queen. Around her are 12 small mounds, each marked by a bundle of dried grass tied with red twine. She gestures for you to sit beside her, but says nothing. You wait. Eventually, she speaks. Every ruler should sit here once a season and listen. To what? You whisper. She tilts her head. Everything. Then she begins a strange ritual. She recites names, not loudly, not in a proclamation voice, but as if telling the soil a bedtime story. Some names you recognize. Past queens, famed generals, river gods, a midwife from the valley who once delivered twins during a flood. Others are just whispers, maybe names lost to history, or maybe ones she invented to fill in the gaps. After each name, she places a pebble on one of the mounds. It's hypnotic. Historians still debate the origin of the 12 mounds. Some claim they represent the 12 sacred clans. Others believe they echo ancient star clusters. A few fringe theorists even suggest they map an old military formation lost to time. But none dispute that the ritual, though informal, is deeply ingrained in Merina queenship. After the names are done, she exhales deeply and says, "Now the hill can speak." You wait. And sure enough, a sound rises, not voices, not spirits, just wind threading through the grass, insects humming, the distant cough of a zebu. But together, it does feel like a kind of answer. "Do you hear it?" she asks. You nod. "Good," she says. "Now we decide." What follows isn't ceremony, it's governance. She opens a satchel of wax tablets, each bearing a knot pattern representing a pending decision. Land redistribution, festival timing, a midwife accused of overcharging, a bridge in the east that keeps collapsing because, as she puts it, someone forgot that rain has opinions. One by one, she lays out the tablets. Beside each, a flower or a thorn or a pinch of salt, symbols of her intended ruling. Later, messengers will carry the decisions back to the council, but here, she makes them, on the hill that listens. You ask if this is just tradition. She smiles. Tradition is what we call things we still need but can't explain. She explains none of her choices, only that she'll come again at the next moon. If the wind shifts differently, some rulings may change. As you descend the hill together, she plucks a red flower and tucks it behind your ear. She sat still longer than most visitors. That means something.
What does it mean? She grins. Probably nothing, but the hill liked it. Later, back at the palace, the wax tablets are sent out, carried in reed pouches by fast-footed messengers who know not to ask questions. The decisions will ripple outward like stones in a wide, ancient pond. And somewhere on a hill, 12 mounds sit in the sun, holding silence and pebbles and the strange weight of governance conducted with reverence and dust and wind.
The morning hums with distant music, low, rhythmic, the sound of drums wrapped in cloth. It's not a festival, and it's definitely not war. No, this is something quieter, something older, the weaving trial. Today, the queen will judge a contest, not of speed or beauty, but of meaning. Weaving in this kingdom is not merely a craft. It is communication. Patterns are language. Colors are moods. Errors can be intentional. And every few years, the court hosts a weaving trial to settle disputes, deliver coded counsel, and occasionally crown the next silent advisor, a position both respected and deeply mysterious. You arrive in the central hall just as the weavers unroll their work. Each piece stretches several arm lengths long, woven on portable looms using dyed raffia, silk threads, bark fibers, and, in one case, shimmering beetle wings. It's less a fashion show, more a tapestry of thought. The queen walks along the line slowly. Each weaving tells a different story. The first, a storm chasing goats over a mountain, with purple spirals suggesting unspoken revenge. The second, a maze of rice stalks, interrupted by a sudden blood-red square, possibly alluding to a past assassination or indigestion. Hard to say. The third, a gentle cascade of blue and white waves. No obvious politics, just peace. Suspiciously peaceful. The fourth, this one is different. It's a nearly all-black piece, save for a single green thread coiled tightly near the bottom. The queen stops, kneels, tilts her head.
Then nods, ever so slightly. Historians still marvel at how Malagasy weaving functioned as a political feedback loop. Officially, these textiles were art. Unofficially, they were satire, policy review, moral critique. Some queens ignored them. This one does not. After the review, the weavers sit. One by one, they're invited to explain their work, though it's widely understood that you never say what a weaving really means. You just circle around it, dropping poetic hints. The queen listens, amused, until a young weaver, no older than 16, says, "My thread broke 3 times, so I made that part a road." Everyone goes silent. The queen claps twice. Wisdom through mistake. That's how I learned to rule. Then she invites the court to vote, not formally, but with stones. Each courtier places a smooth pebble beside the weaving they think spoke the most. The all-black piece wins. The queen, however, declares the teenager with the thread road as her silent advisor. She saw ruin and turned it into direction, she says. That's governance. The hall erupts in applause. The teenager turns visibly pale. After the crowd disperses, the queen sits with you on the veranda.
"You know," she says, sipping sour hibiscus tea, "I once wove a lie into my sash just to see if anyone would notice." "Did they?" She grins. "Yes, my mother. She made me wear it for a week as punishment. And pride." You laugh. She doesn't. Weaving tells the truth slowly. That's why we trust it more than shouting. Later, you pass by the royal loom room, walls covered in past trials, like a slow-motion diary of rule. One pattern catches your eye. 2 birds flying apart, their wings joined by a single, unbroken red thread. You don't know what it means, but you have a feeling you'll dream about it tonight.
A soft drizzle tap-tap-taps against the thatched rooftops this morning, curling the air with petrichor and slowing everyone's stride. But inside the palace's southern wing, a different kind of storm is gathering, one made of scrolls, incense, and scandalously detailed calendars. Today is the Archive Day. It's not a public event. In fact, it's barely an event at all. But once every moon cycle, the queen sequesters herself with her record keepers to sift through the documents that shape, bind, and occasionally contradict her own reign. You're invited to observe, quietly. The archive chamber is part library, part attic, part confessional. Scrolls hang like drying laundry. Palm leaf manuscripts rest in clay jars. There are weather logs, census rhymes, tax poems, and one forbidden list that appears to be just names of suspiciously gifted chickens. The queen arrives barefoot, her fingers already smudged with ink. She picks a scroll at random, unrolls it halfway, and frowns. "I'm listed here as being in 2 places at once," she mutters. "I told them to fix this after the goat festival." A scribe coughs. "We thought it was poetic license." "Poetry shouldn't get me impeached," she says, and starts editing. This is not mindless bureaucracy. This is curation of memory. She's not rewriting history. She's refining it, sharpening the fuzzy borders of official truth, clarifying context, and gently correcting the narratives that may one day teach her great-granddaughter how to rule.
She stumbles upon a census from 12 years ago. 83 people in one village and 95 children born that year? We're either dealing with prodigies or someone miscounted goats again. Historians still puzzle over the Malagasy archival tradition. Despite its oral richness, the Merina kept meticulous hybrid records, blending poetry with inventory, parables with flood data, royal gossip with medicinal plant lists. To a modern eye, it's chaos. To a quinine, it's code. At one point, she pauses, tilting her head at a damaged record labeled "The Disappeared Canoe." She reads the half-legible lines. "Left at dusk, 3 drums, no return. Sandals found beside the east salt well." She makes a mark. That needs checking. If they vanished with drums, someone would have heard it. Later, you watch her update a family tree. She draws a careful line between 2 names, then hesitates, leaving a gap, small but intentional. Some things we suspect but don't confirm. This keeps the future curious. It's in this moment you realize that Queen doesn't just rule a kingdom, she edits its possibilities. She shepherds not just facts, but the shape of remembering. To lighten the mood, she unrolls a scroll titled "Domestic Disputes of Notable Absurdity." She reads one aloud. "Farmer accused neighbor's chicken of seducing his ducks. Resolved by gifting a neutral egg."
She laughs so hard she snorts. Another, "Woman insists her roof is haunted by jealous rice spirits. Offered them roasted yam and received no further complaints." You both sit on the floor now, surrounded by dusty scrolls and stories so strange they feel like dreams you've once had. Before leaving, she tucks a freshly inked note into a jar labeled "To be remembered differently." You ask what's inside. She shrugs. "Mistakes that taught me more than they embarrassed me." Outside, the rain has stopped. The air smells of ink and tea and softened memory. And as the Queen walks out of the archive, hands still stained, you realize that ruling wisely isn't just about making decisions. It's about deciding how you'll be remembered for them.
The sun has barely crested the eastern ridge, yet already the palace is vibrating with an energy you haven't felt before. Not urgency, but anticipation. Today is not about statecraft or ceremony or metaphor. Today is about laughter. It's Fool's Day in the Highlands. Not quite a holiday, not quite a ritual, somewhere in between.
Once a year, the queen relinquishes all authority for one full day, ceding control of the court to the appointed royal fool, who, for exactly 24 hours, may reverse roles, mock policies, and impersonate the queen without punishment. You're skeptical, until you see the queen step out of her chambers wearing mismatched shoes and a crowd of banana peels. "Good morning," she declares in the flattest voice possible. "All trade routes are now goat paths. Everyone receives 3 mangoes and her long nap." The court roars. The appointed fool, a wiry woman named Salama with teeth like a mischievous fox, climbs onto the queen's chair, blows a conch shell backward, and decrees, "From now on, we measure time in spoons. No meetings unless you're holding 2. Servants rush to fetch spoons. This is not nonsense for nonsense sake. This is inversion with purpose. Historians still debate whether Fool's Day served as genuine catharsis or controlled rebellion. What's clear is that it gave the queen vital insight into what people found ridiculous, broken, or unspoken, and also how well her court could laugh at itself.
The fool hosts fake court cases. A fishmonger suing the rain for being late. A rooster demanding a raise for waking people up. A tax collector who claims his pockets are cursed with holes. The queen listens to all, taking notes with an actual mango as her pen. And then there's the game of royal mistranslation. Nobles are assigned absurd nicknames: Feather of Regret, He Who Sweats Through Silk, Countess Crocodile Teeth, and must introduce themselves formally without laughing. Most fail. Even the guards are in on it. One bows deeply and declares, "Your Majesty, the army requests permission to replace spears with sarcastic comments." The queen claps. "Approved, provided they're sharp enough." In the afternoon, food is served upside down. Bowls on plates, spoons and bread, pineapple where no pineapple should ever be. Musicians play melodies backward. One scribe tries to write an official letter using only the letter E. It's abstract. But beneath all of the hilarity lies a strange kind of wisdom. Because when the fool jokes, "Perhaps we should rule through naps and yam pies," the queen replies, "Only if the yam pies are agreed upon by a yam council." The joke lands, but later, in private, she adds, "They really do need more rest." You ask her why she started this tradition. She smiles. "Power makes people lie to you. Laughter makes them tell the truth." As dusk falls, a fake coronation is held. The fool crowns herself with a soup bowl, gives out ridiculous titles, and finally exiles the queen to the garden with a pet duck. The queen complies with grace and a slightly smug smile. The next morning, everything returns to normal. Except the tax form now has a line for emotional burden. The mango quota is being quietly reviewed, and one guard actually replaced his spear with a scroll of insults, pending approval. You realize sometimes the sharpest critique wears a jester's hat, and that leadership, real leadership, is not afraid to laugh, to listen, and to be the butt of the joke, especially if it helps the kingdom breathe. The final rays of day stretch long across the valley, and the palace itself seems to exhale. Walls glowing warm with late sunlight, footsteps softer, the air tinged with eucalyptus and sweetened ash. Tonight is for closing the circle. Tonight is the ancestor whispering. You'd heard of it before, in scattered phrases and half-explained rituals, something between remembrance and confession, held only when the queen feels it's time. No set date, no formal decree. Just a feeling like rain coming from clear skies.
The courtyard is quiet, save for the creak of bamboo lanterns swaying in the breeze. A mat is unrolled beneath the great baobab tree, its bark etched with symbols older than the kingdom itself. The queen sits at its base, back straight, legs folded, hands resting on a bowl of cooled ash. No crown, no sash, just silence. One by one, members of the court approach, not to speak to her, but to kneel beside the tree and whisper into the air. A name, a regret, a memory too slippery to say aloud in daylight. One says, "Forgive me for forgetting my grandmother's recipe." Another murmurs, "I still see his face when the birds fly west." Even a general leans in and whispers, "Tell the ancestors I've stopped fearing sleep." The queen never reacts. She simply adds a pinch of ash to the bowl after each whisper, not to erase, but to mark.
When it's your turn, you hesitate, then kneel and say whatever needed saying. No one judges. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were spiritual events or deeply symbolic governance, whether the queen acted as conduit, counselor, or simply witness. The answer you suspect is yes, all of the above, and something more. Once everyone has spoken, the queen rises. She carries the bowl to the garden, where a single flame flickers in a carved stone. She tips in the ash, and the fire flares, not big, but bright enough to catch the eye of anyone who might be watching from beyond. Then she says, clearly, but softly, "We heard you, and we remember." Later, over lukewarm tea and quiet conversation, she leans toward you and asks, "Do you know what I fear most?" You shake your head. She says, "Being remembered only for what I ruled, not for what I listened to." She smiles, not wistful, just tired in the way that only people who've carried everyone else's silence can be. And then she retires for the evening. No guards, no entourage, just the soft thud of her sandals echoing into the night. You remain in the courtyard for a while, listening.
Not for voices, not for ghosts, but for the gentle, ongoing hum of a kingdom held together not just by law, but by story, memory, laughter, and the very human need to be heard. And somewhere, beneath the baobab, in the archives, atop the hill, and inside the woven threads of royal garments, the Queen's legacy has already begun to root, not in monuments, but in meaning.
Now the stars arrive, one by one, soft pinpricks in a velvet dome. The drums have gone still. The wind has settled. Even the crickets seem to chirp more slowly. You lie back on a woven mat, the same kind used for royal ceremonies in midday naps. It smells of straw and salt and smoke. Somewhere in the distance, water laps gently at stone. You hear it between your breaths. The Queen's voice fades like a dream you almost remember. Her steps, her laugh, her questions still echo, but not loudly, just enough to remind you that she was real. And more than real, she mattered.
Not because of power, but because of presence. Tonight, the moon hangs low, like it's listening too. And maybe it is.
maybe everything is. Your eyes flutter closed, gently, without urgency. Sleep comes not as an escape, but as a continuation of her story, of yours, of all the whispered names now carried by wind and fire and memory. And as you drift into sleep, know this:
You were there. You walked beside her. You listened too. Sweet dreams. Sweet dreams.